Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is political possibilities. Joining us this evening on the show to discuss all this and more are Dr. Jehan Pereira, Executive Director of the National Peace Council, Lasil De Silva, former Director Administration Parliament, Attorney at Law Sankita Gunaratna, Head of Governance and Anti-Corruption, Verity Research, as well as Dr. Vinyari Ratna, President of the Sarvodaya movement. To pose questions from our panelists this evening, on to my immediate right is Niresh Adithambi, Consultant Director at Newsfirst. On to my immediate left is Nadim Majid. You too can join in as far as the conversation is concerned. The number to message your questions to is 076 656 5353. The number once again, 076 656 5353. Let's get the ball rolling today with Dr. Jehan Pereira, Executive Director of the National Peace Council. Dr. Jehan, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Starting off, tell me, Dr. Jehan, in 2015, most of the civil society organizations in the country were unified with what they wanted for the country. There was Mahinda Rajapaksa contesting elections, there was Maitri Sirisena who was contesting elections, and there was a good governance notion that was being dropped by the civil society. As a result of that, there was Maitri Sirisena who was elected as the president of the country, with the blessings of the civil society. This time around, where is the civil society standing if there is a general or a presidential election? Appraise us, make us cognizant as to what the civil society is thinking.
Very good question. I appreciate that. Especially going back to 2015, where civil society had a unified position with regard to the way forward, because there was a lot of desire on the part of civil society that the government that is to be formed should follow the good governance principles, and this was being promised by those in the then opposition. At the present time, I mean, with regard to the specific question about which election, I think most of us would want the presidential election first, because that is what is scheduled. That is what is on schedule, and so that is what we expect to happen. And of course, there are also concerns, there are doubts about the presidential elections because of what some of the party leaders are saying. But on the other hand, if there are parliamentary elections, that too is acceptable. What is important is that there should be elections. Elections that lead to a government with a fresh mandate, because that is something that we have not been having for a long time. In a sense, after the protest movement of 2022, where the president, the then president, and the government had to resign, I believe that the government lost its mandate. It lost the mandate from the people. That's why they had to resign. They had to flee the country. And then came a stopgap president who has continued in office along with the old government, essentially the old government. So there has been a question of legitimacy. There is legality in the government, but there is a question of legitimacy, because what we have now, the parliament we have now, the government we have now, is one that the people rejected, so much so that the leaders of that government had to resign.
Dr. Jehan, just for clarity's sake, my question was, the civil society was unified in what they wanted in 2015. Are they unified now with what they want? Let me rephrase my earlier question to you. The NPP is contesting the elections. The SJB had already told that they would contest elections. The SLPP had also told the people that they may contest elections, whether it's going to be with Ranil Wickremesinghe or not is a big question mark thus far. However, individuals in the caliber of Harin Fernando had told that Ranil Wickremesinghe is going to be the candidate of the United National Party at the forthcoming presidential election. Given that, who is civil society supported?
I mean, civil society, there is no unified civil society, you know.
There was in 2015, not anymore.
Well, if by civil society you mean NGOs, civil society organized NGOs, yeah, then I would say that publicly the civil society is for elections. We all want elections, we all call for elections. I don't see anyone in civil society saying there should not be elections. So on that we are unified, but with regard to whom we would want to support, then there is a difference of opinion.
Who is the candidate that the National Peace Council is supporting?
No, we don't. I mean, the National Peace Council, we don't support any particular political party. We are for certain policies. And our policies would be that there should be adherence to rule of law, democracy, ethnic justice, that is particularly important to us, ethnic justice, a political solution to the ethnic conflict. So, I mean, that is what we would advocate.
Right, so you say, Dr. Jehan, that there are certain principles that the National Peace Council adheres to, and on the top of the agenda is finding a political solution to the national conflict. Let me go back to 2015. Do you remember who the Prime Minister was at that time? Between 2015 and 2019?
Of course, our present president.
Our present president. So, given the fact, if the present president is contesting the elections, do you think the civil society will support him because he failed to find a proper settlement or a solution to the ethnic conflict in the country when he was in power?
I can't speak for civil society as a whole.
Let's talk about the National Peace Council.
The National Peace Council would, we would look at the manifestos of the different political parties, and we would say that if the manifesto was something good, we would say that that is something we would accept. We find positive. But
how can you trust that when you are in power, you don't find a settlement for the problem at hand, and you are requesting for another mandate because you are the president to carry out your task that you were not able to carry out? Can you believe that?
No, so we would,
do you think the people are so naive?
So, as an organization, we will not support any particular candidate, because that's not the system that is acceptable in Sri Lanka. We want NGOs usually don't name a candidate and support a candidate. So, we would look at the policies. Of course, as individual voters, we'll decide to support one or the other. And then when we do as individual voters, we look at what are they saying, what is their track record, can they take the people with them, do the people trust them, what credibility do they have? All those will factor in to the decision that, say, I, as an individual, will make.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jehan Pereira, Executive Director of the National Peace Council. I am now moving my attention towards Lasil De Silva, former Director of Administration in Parliament. Lasil, we saw the manner in which how Paratharangi Bandara not once but twice went on to say that the Constitution warrants for a referendum or a referendum to be held in place of a parliamentary election or a general election in the country. As such, the presidential or the parliament election should be postponed for 2 years. Is that possible? You've been in parliament for some time.
You know, looking at the constitution, actually all what we need, and the constitution stipulates particularly the duration of the term and when the election should be held. So we are now in a kind of period where elections have to be held. So looking at the big picture, whatever it is, all what people want, following the constitution, going on the basis, like Jehan said, you know, there was even a people struggle. Why did they come out? We have been going through a lot of hardships all due to economic, social, I think political, all those issues, right? So these issues needs to be resolved. In my view, everybody who have ruled this country for the last 50 years, I would always say, because with the changes in the constitutions only, I mean, the situation became so bad and people can't even feel basically what is in store for tomorrow. So what we really need, you know, leave aside the constitution, as Lanka Bandara said, if they want referendum, I mean, that may be their choice of reasons known to them, but a referendum also.
But can you hold a referendum?
You know,
place
85,
of a-
86, there are certain provisions where the president could definitely.
Presidential or a parliamentary election.
Yeah,
Can that be done?
now that was the same thing they did in 80s, 82, if I remember right.
Too.
So what happened was, you know, it's a denial of our voting rights again, right? At an election, all what you need is an election. Asking people whether you want a referendum through which whether elections have to be postponed for 2 years, that's a denial of our
But
voting
that
rights.
could be done. Example, you
No,
go
it
to
can't be done in a democracy. It can't be done in a
but
democracy.
constitutional.
No, constitutionally also,
done.
you know, this constitution is a flawed constitution, I would say, right? They can make use of all that.
No,
for
that's
their,
we have to work with what we have now. at the
No,
moment.
no,
So
no.
my question is very simple. Can they go for a 2/3 majority in parliament? And if they win that in parliament, can they go for a referendum?
You know,
yes or a no? That's all. I'm
yes, because
It can be done.
It can be done if the president wants it, because
Lanka Bandara
ultimately,
is not wrong.
no, you can't say it is wrong, because these are democratic principles, right? Now you have a constitution which doesn't permit democratic governance, for that matter. This is a dictator. Presidency, in my view, is a dictator, right? The creation of the presidency, according to Jayawardena also, it was taken up in parliament. There were a number of questions raised. He said no, it's a government where he wants powers to take unpopular decisions, and not without listening to the parliament. That is dictatorial, because parliament again is a representative parliament. The biggest problem right now, is it a representative parliament? That is where another problem we have.
But my question is very simple, Lassila. I'm asking you, can the president call for a 2/3 majority in parliament? If he wins it, can he call for a referendum?
There is room for it, yes. There is room for it. There is room for it, right?
So he
because
can do it.
finally he is
That
the
could
man.
be his last straw.
Yeah, that
To
could
stay
be
on power for another 2 years.
Yeah, but at the same time,
He can do it.
he will be able to do it, because those things are possible. Now see, look at the way how he came into parliament, right? Within a week after the elections, you have to nominate a member. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. It happened months later. Look at Rahman's, right? Vacancy occurred, the next day it was done. That is the system that should be followed. But the problem here is those things, you know, constitutional provisions, it is implemented for their advantage, and that should not be the way. It should be implemented for the benefit of the people, so that it creates a legitimate government, you know.
But you can go for a referendum.
You know, let me say it this way. I would strictly say no, because constitution permits, but use
How
of
long have you been working at the
37 years in parliament.
So you must be knowing Ranil Wickremesinghe very well, because he's been in parliament for nearly 50 years. And out of that 50 years,
He was almost about the same period. I came in.
7 years you've been knowing him. What do you think he will do?
You can look at him. That itself is an expression about him.
Thank you very much, Rasil De Silva, former Direct Administration Parliament. I now move my attention towards Attorney at Law Sankita Gunaratne, Head of Governance and Anti-Corruption Verited Research. Sankita, Jehan and Lasil spoke about a systemic change that the people wanted through a struggle that happened a couple of years ago. Do you think that struggle, what the people wanted, the systemic change that the people demanded for, has happened during the last 2 years?
I would say not.
And why is that?
On the first count, the issue was that there were protests and a call, as Jehan referred to, and a call for the government to step down and for the president to step down. But with the president stepping down, what we saw was a reconstitution and a reconsolidation of the same forces as effectively the same government with a different person at its head. Again, as Jehan referred to, they may have legality but not legitimacy. So the system change there itself, we find, has been has failed because that call was not responded to in that correct way at the start. But in terms of the reform agenda itself, what civil society, what the people also called for through what was largely peaceful protest and what was a very diverse group of protesters, has not been achieved because if you look at what was asked for, the abolition of the executive presidency has not taken place. Recovering stolen assets, one of the structural benchmarks of the IMF program that Sri Lanka has agreed to was that we would pass a law on the recovery of stolen assets. Even the passage of the law has not been done, leave alone actually making progress on recovering stolen assets, which the Civil Society Governance Diagnostic Report actually called for. And it is very unlikely, to be honest, to see that we would see that actually take place. The law might be passed. We are on a spree of passing an entire spate of laws with little to no consultation. So we are likely to see the law pass because we have to and we've agreed to it. But implementation, there is almost no likelihood that anything will proceed because let's face it, we're talking about a captured state, we're talking about captured institutions. So even though on paper we might provide for independence of institutions, we still have the same people occupying office. So that is not making progress. On the Anti-Corruption Act, we saw it being passed. We're supposed to have asset declarations up and running by July this year. We are yet to see prosecutions taking place. We saw yesterday a decision from the Supreme Court that basically laid aside a case until the resolution of the issue of the appointment of the Director General of the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption. So all hopes, all citizens look to the Bribery Commission with the new Anti-Corruption Act to actually move towards accountability for prosecutions, for prevention, and we are not seeing that.
Sankita, Sri Lanka has tested and tried political parties a lot over the last few years, mainly the two main political parties, the UNP and the SLFP. Now the SLFP broke away as the SLPP and they are having somewhat of a majority in parliament right now. And you have the UNP breakaway faction, the SJB. The only party that the people have not tested or tried in governance is the JVP or the NPP at this point of time. In terms of corruption, in terms of a clean slate, can the people have faith on a party like the NPP? Because everyone is talking about an alternative force right now and they're looking at the NPP at this point of time. Is it fair enough for the people to look at them progressively moving forward to an election year?
So what we're seeing from that party, from the NPP, is a promise to actually address corruption, but never, as you said, never having been in government, we don't see a track record. But if you go towards measurable indicators of what they will do or have done and what is within their control, one specific thing that civil society has consistently called for is for politicians to proactively make their asset declarations public. And the JVP is the one major political party that has not yet done that. So it doesn't bode well, it doesn't augur well, but again, I'm not a political analyst. However, it is unclear what the plan is.
All three members, that's Anukumar Lisanayaka, Vijay and Harini Amarasuri has not declared the assets.
They have not
public.
made their assets publicly available, to be clear, at that point of time
What
when
does
the
that
campaign.
show, in your opinion?
It could be a lack of belief in the asset declaration system, or it could range from that to all the way to actually concealing assets. We don't know, but what we do know is that, I mean, even the political parties that we say are bad, some of them have come forth and done this, and so it's really unclear. Just to be clear for our viewers, there was no legal requirement, and there is no legal requirement for members of parliament to make their asset declarations public themselves. And what the call was for members of parliament to proactively do this, and they failed to do that. So I'm responding to your question with what we do know.
With just 3 members, if they don't do it, what assurance does the public have that they will do it if they come to power?
We don't know.
Thank you very much. Attorney at Law Sankita Gunaratna, Head of Governance and Anti-Corruption Related Research. Dr. Vinya Ariratna, President of the Sarvodaya Movement. Dr. Vinya, firstly, you are heading a movement that was founded in 1958. What lessons can Sri Lanka learn from a movement like the Sarvodaya movement, given the fact that we are facing a critical juncture in the history of the country?
Shamir, now when you look at the history of the Sarvodaya movement and the work it has done, it's mainly in the development sector, community development sector. I would say the best lesson is that the power of the people, that they can make things happen on the ground, and also the faith that you can have on people to make fundamental changes in our society and changes in their own lives. And connecting it to what's happening in the country now, I think the solutions also should come from the people now, not from the politicians. And the people's solutions should influence the politicians, and I think right now we are in a critical turning point in our history, where we have to, I personally believe that even the upcoming election is not going to be the same as previous elections, because there will be a lot of changes, particularly the way the youth think, and this is the first election after the Aragalaya, right? After youth have really spoken out, who are clamoring for a change, a system change in the country.
Dr. Vinya, I want to drag your attention to the Indian elections that concluded just today, and it went on for a few months, a few weeks, and we saw none of the political parties being able to gain a clear majority in the 500 plus members parliament in India, and the BJP, which many thought would record a resounding victory at the elections, were only able to get 243 seats, and they had to join another coalition party to be in governance, and as a result of that, Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister once again for a 3rd term. What does this show in a country like Sri Lanka? Why am I asking you this question, Dr. Vinya? Parties that have ruled for 10 years, there seems to be a cycle that they always have to leave, or they have to have a good exit at the end of the day. In a country like Sri Lanka, how important is elections? And how important is for the political parties to understand that people have to exercise their franchise, and they are the people to choose and not the politicians themselves?
I'll reply it as a citizen and as a professional, because I'm not a political analyst and I know least about elections in India and the dynamics that they are. But what I can say is that even when you look at the election campaign in India, I think they were overconfident. I think the parties were overconfident that it was going to be a landslide, and that kind of rhetoric. Maybe it's part of the campaign. But the reality is that again people showed that they are concerned about certain issues that affect their lives, daily lives, right? So in the world's largest democracy, I think they have really spoken out, and it's good for democracy. You don't have absolute power for one particular party or a coalition. So in Sri Lanka, I think we have a very good history of having different governments, and but we have seen a tendency where it's a protest vote. It's just to take the previous government out and not to really look at the policy. So I think that culture needs to change. So,
Are you saying it should not be a protest vote?
no, no. It should be an informed vote to change the direction of the country. And I think there is an opportunity now where you can question, and we have seen the last couple of years, citizens have started to get more engaged in dialogues and questioning and accountability. And you know, I have sat here on certain issues and we never believed that certain things would happen against corruption and exposing individuals who have really abused the power of their officers to make money. Things have changed because it is a public opinion. I am a person who believes strongly in the public opinion, and I think no matter how you try to manipulate. Now you asked this other question from Lasil about whether the parliament, I mean, you can have legality, you can have legal provision to make a change, but I believe that it's not just the numbers in the parliament that a party may have, it's also how much the ordinary people influence their thinking. And when it comes to that, they are concerned still. I mean, that's the hope that we have in our country, because these leaders are still sensitive to public opinion.
So, Dr. Venya, the last time you were on the show, we were talking about the health crisis in Sri Lanka. Just 48 hours after the show was aired, the NMRA chairman was removed by the new health minister who was in power. So I don't believe when you say you are not a political analyst, but I'm going to anyway pose you a question as a citizen of the country, Dr. Venya. Dr. Venya, aren't you astonished that someone from the political party that the president is representing is saying that there should be a referendum and not a presidential or a general election?
I think...
aren't you astonished?
I'm astonished not by that statement alone. I mean, there had been so many statements made by other people also with regard to, for example, the local government election. It's still not called off. It's still valid. And certain campaigns that are happening now, or certain actions by people in power, directly violates the election law, right? But they continue to do that. So I think it's a very sad state of affairs, and this political culture should change. And I think people are just observing now, and when the right time comes, I think they will speak out.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vinyaratna, President of the Sarvodaya movement. On to my immediate right is Niresh Netambe. On to my immediate left is Nadim Majid. Nadim, yes.
Before you start,
yes.
Sure, I just want to make clarification that the JVP is not an untried and untested party. They did spend just over a year in government
In
from 2004 to 2005. In fact, the current leader was the Minister for Agriculture, Cabinet Minister for Agriculture, Livestock and something else at the time. And the reason that they left government was at a time of disaster in the country, immediately after the tsunami. The JVP leadership took opposition to the fact that the President, Kumaratunga at the time, decided to coordinate relief efforts in the north and east with the LTT. That was the position of the JVP. They abandoned government during a time of national crisis because they didn't want to coordinate relief efforts in the north and east through the LTT. Just for clarity.
Yeah, they were not in governance in terms of being holding the position of Prime Minister or...
Major part of the coalition.
Yeah.
So, Niresh, do you want to start or...
Thank you, Shamir. Thank you. Dr. Jehan, now we are faced with a political situation where we have two major parties, the NPP and the SJB, and it's not clear at all who the front runner is. Various people say various things, but it's not at all clear. And in this kind of situation, it becomes very important as to what the smaller parties would do to either support or oppose one of the two larger parties. So now, right now, we have a large number of small parties. Could you analyze for us a few of these parties? For example, what's the situation and stance of the SLPP and the UNP and the SLFP, those three parties?
Well,
we are the two major parties.
Well, I mean, the UNP, SLPP, and SLFP, I mean, they can hardly be called small parties. I mean, SLPP still has over 100 MPs in parliament. I think the UNP and SLPP are in alliance, and they are staying on, and I think they would like to stay on even further. SLFP has broken up. I mean, there is internal conflict, and I don't know which way they want to go, whom they want to support. But certainly the UNP and SLPP combined is a fairly formidable one. It's also comparable to SJB and JVP. I mean, the UNP SLPP combination is the government at this time. So what they believe is what they are doing at this time. I mean, you know, in terms of economic reform, in terms of passing laws. So we can very well see what they want.
Dr. Jahan, just to add to what Niresh's question was, in an article last year you described President Wickremesinghe as a person having a rational mind or having rational qualities. And you said this specifically in relation to his position on the 13th Amendment, when he said we should implement the 13th Amendment in full. Now, you said that in response to Shamir's questions earlier, you said, look, as the National Peace Council, we look for what are the policies of these different things. And you also said that the NPP has set itself up as the alternative to the established system, established way of doing things. But in your particular area of advocacy, which is on reconciliation and finding a political solution to the national question, the ethnic conflict, when you look at all of these parties do have a track record. As I mentioned earlier, even with the JVP, they have a track record. And I'm not referring to the first or the second insurrections, but when they were in the first iteration of the UPFA, they were one of the more vociferous warhounds, right, which led to the collapse of the CFA as well. That was the JVP not 40 years ago, that's just 20 years ago. And in political history, 20 years is not a very long time. You know what the position of the SLPP is. You know what the position of the Rajapaksas are. You have some understanding of what the position of people like Sajid Premadasa and the SJB is. And some understanding of Mr. Wickremesinghe's position and the UNP's position as well. So when you take all of that, the track record into consideration as well, the President's newest initiative, I think, is the Truth, Unity and Reconciliation Commission. I think you were on one of the committees that were studying it. When you look at that, are you unable to make a call on who is most likely to advance your advocacy agenda?
Well, they have different strengths. I mean, the President is the one who has most clearly articulated what needs to be done. He has referred to the need for power sharing, inter-ethnic power sharing through the 13th Amendment, through the provincial councils. He has spoken about the need for development and making the North a Jaffna development hub. He's spoken about the return of land that the military has occupied and that needs to be given back to the people. He's talked about missing people. So he has actually very clearly articulated that. And in fact, but his delivery has been deficient. What he has been saying, articulating, he has still not been able to put into practice, to implement. So that is where he has been weak. Now then look at the JVP. I see the JVP, I have listened to the JVP leader speaking. He makes excellent analysis now of what went wrong in terms of the ethnic issues.
Do you think he's had a lot of personal growth in the last 20 years?
I think he has changed, he has evolved, because he makes a very good analysis, and he says that from 1948, the year in which a section of our people were deprived of their citizenship rights, because they had been here only for 100 years. Now, our people are going to foreign countries and in 5 years they're trying to get citizenship in foreign countries, and 10 years they get it also. Here, so he points that out. He says that was wrong, that these were done for political reasons. He makes good analysis. But what he has not yet spoken about is what the solution to that problem is. I mean, that's where I think he's deficient. He's strong on the analysis, and he's strong in being able to articulate it very eloquently, the political analysis about how nationalism, racism was used to win votes. Sajith Premadasa, very recently, I mean, he has, in his May Day speech...
Do you believe that when the JVP took that decision to abandon the government in the immediate post-tsunami situation in the country, when President Kumaratunga made the decision to coordinate relief efforts, because relief efforts were deficient in the north and east at the time, and I suppose the Disaster Management Council at the time probably decided we need to coordinate, and like it or not, the LTT is there, and we'll have to coordinate with them if we are to bring relief to the people. Do you think that when the JVP took the decision to abandon the government at that time, that was also a political decision to win votes?
I believe it was according to that
by
thinking.
Anurakumara Dissanayaka's own analysis?
Yeah, that was an analysis taken many years earlier. No? People are also evolving, they are learning. Even, I mean, the people in general are evolving and learning.
Well, I mean, when you look at the president as well, you look at the president, and now I mean, President Wickremesinghe has said that he personally does not endorse those calls for referendum, but the calls for referendum are coming from very senior officials in his party. And when you look at that and the kind of statements that are coming out from the government, from those supporting this referendum, you look at the accompanying statements with the 82 referendum as well, there's not a lot of evolution there, Dr. Pereira.
Yeah, so that's the thing. There's one thing about words and having the correct thinking, the other is implementing it and having the determination to implement. I think what we need in our country, Vinya spoke about the need to learn from the community, but we also need leadership. If you look at the countries that sorted their problems out, they had extraordinary leaders who could rise above, who could look at the welfare of all, and who were willing to even sacrifice themselves for the cause they believed in. So we need such a leadership. We don't have it at this
Dr.
time.
Now, recently we saw the manner in which how a member of the Rishad Badruddin's party spoke on media stating that there are secret talks between Ranil Wickremesinghe and Sajith Premadasa to contest the upcoming elections. Is that a good development?
I mean,
would that be welcomed by the civil society?
So first of all, we need to question the credibility of the person. I mean, I don't know, is this true or not? Because people can say various things to discredit a political leader. That's also possible. Now, if they are indeed talking, I don't know whether they are talking.
Let's hypothetically say that they are talking. Would the civil society then support them?
Well, it depends what they're talking about, what their plans are, what they intend to do, whether they'll do it. But I'm not sure that they are actually talking. I mean, this is what some politician is saying, and we don't know whether he's saying the truth. Mm-hmm. So we should not rush to judgment on that basis.
Let's say now, Dr. Jahan spoke about the fact that how the NPP leadership has now matured much better to what they were or they were expressing in 2005 to the question that Nadeem posed to Dr. Jahan. But how convenient is it to test and try things on the public's expense? Sad. What are we talking about? We're talking about a country, we're talking about patriotism, we're talking about a country that needs to be governed properly, and that comes at the expense of the public?
I think you're right. Everybody, so far, they really play politics with a kind of hope where you can ultimately win the elections. It should not be that way. Actually, a political party has to win power, but that has to be done genuinely because, so far from the 70s, basically, most of the politicians, they wanted to win the next election. Even JVP, NPP, actually my problem is, the JVP being a communist kind of a, kind of a way. Now that may not be the ideal situation here in this country in a different way, because we have experienced now, even in there's a report, they had published a booklet, rapid response. They say they will be electing their president through the parliament. Actually, I foresee a very dangerous situation where they are also trying to implement or at least convert it to a sort of a central committee like in China or Russia, where they ultimately they decide everything.
But the NPP is not advocating for a central committee, right? They said what they are calling for the election of a president.
I will not trust, very frankly. I mean, that's my personal opinion, because I can't trust. I have known them for a very long period of time, and actually even Lal Khan, most of them, they said it is their policies ultimately that will come into force, that they will implement. And for that matter, I am sad. I know a lot of my friends in the NPP, actually, why they should basically support that kind of a thing, because I personally feel the governance system, other than something similar to ours with whatever the improvements needed, is the ideal situation for a country like ours. Not strong leftist oriented, that kind of governments. I mean, we have
Dr. Vinya, how important is it to have a team? Because on this very show, every week, those who come on the show highlight the fact that any political party who comes into power should have a team. We have to look at the team who they would be fielding at the upcoming elections, and as such, people should take an informed decision. As you mentioned before, it should not be a protest vote, it should be an informed decision that the people make. How important is it for people to look at the respective teams of these political parties?
Yes, I think I fully agree with that. It's not just the team, but also the policies that they put forward. Now, there are few important social issues that if I just identify them, for example, of course the economic, what their solution is to the economic crisis, and what kind of social protection mechanism that these candidates will put forward. So you have to have a team which will of course be multidisciplinary, hopefully, and will be able to articulate the kind of analysis and the articulation of the solutions. I think that's very important. And of course we have seen, to be fair, by NPP, you referred to NPP about the transformation. As an outside, I see some form of broad basing their leadership. That's a positive sign, because they are accommodating some non-political individuals in their camp, and that kind of involvement, also gender and all that, is welcoming. I think I think we should not have fixed ideas about the parties, and we know that some of the people who were leaders in 2005 are no longer there. They have shifted to other political parties.
But Dr. Vinya, we know, as anyone who knows sort of people who study political history, that take for example Mahinda Rajapaksa started out as an activist and defender of human rights, and then towards the end of his second term of president, he was being accused of committing allegedly gross violations of human rights. His administration was being accused. So we know that power has an impact on how people work as well, right? And I think Sanketa said this actually the last time that she was on Face the Nation, is that the system itself corrupts people that come in there. The JVP, like we said before, is not a party that doesn't have a track record. It's not new. The JVP has been around for a very long time, been on the receiving end of government violence as well, they are party members, but they've also been on the side of doling out violence. When you look at that, I mean, at the last presidential election, actually, you were part of a movement, and I think Mr. De Silva was also part of that movement, the National People's Party, a different NPP, where you put forward a set of policies and you all put forward Mahesh Senanayake as a candidate. When you look at that kind of movement, which I suppose you could say is a relatively new movement, and this, how do you balance it out? How do you say, like?
I think the context in which, it was not supporting a candidate, but it was a much broader civil society movement that was initially mobilizing, and then of course the nomination would have come from a party. But I think there was a clamor for a change. I think it was obvious at that time, because the expectations of the Yahapalana government, I think,
had fallen short.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, I mean, people know that the traditional parties have the advantage. They have a machinery, they have resources, they have money. But I think the change should come from other quarters also. Now, we are talking about, you were just naming a few candidates and few parties, but there are also now new small groups which have also been organized and very, very active also, and particularly youth have come forward.
Dr. Vindhya, in that context, do you feel that there is a, so we do know that, I mean, like Dr. Jayan was saying as well, there is an appetite for change amongst the public, undoubtedly. There is maybe an anti-establishment trend as well, which the NPP has managed to secure the vast number or the significant portion of that support. Do you feel like there is maybe a failing on the part of civil society? Groups like the National Movement for Social Justice, of which the late Venerable Madhula Wesoviduthera did a lot to bring Yahapalana and eventually Maithripala Sirisena to the presidency as well. Do you feel like there is, in this current climate, where there is not just a clamor for change, but an outcry from the public, that civil society is maybe failing to provide guidance to the voter?
Yeah, I think that right now it's a different context, because we are just recovering from an economic crisis. I think that has a huge impact on the way that people are thinking, and particularly after 2022, when the country was at it just came to a standstill, and the impact, we are still seeing the impact. I mean, when you look at the social statistics, whether it's unemployment or nutritional statistics on children, and so I think it's very very difficult to also predict what's going to happen between now and September or October. That's my reading, because none of these parties have really addressed some of the issues or the solution. They haven't proposed any solutions to these problems as well. So here, if you look at the track record of these parties, I think that track record is also not very relevant now. You have to really come up with some new solutions to see, because even the impact, the negative impact was disproportionately on the poor. Now, who is articulating about the poverty? How, poverty alleviation? Have you heard? This is how we are going to address poverty. Poverty has doubled during the.
What's the alternative, Dr. Vindhya?
No, alternative should come from those parties. That's where the role of the civil society becomes important, because that's what we are questioning. It's not an outcry. I would say we have to demand from the parties what is their solution to the economic crisis in a very sustainable way. What is their solution to the ethnic crisis? What is the solution to some of the problems that we are facing in health sector, education sector, transport, public services? Now, I think that's where we need to educate the public, we need to engage the public to question. And
but Dr. Vindhya, when people invite these political parties to come for an open debate, so people can understand what they have in mind, because they are not talking about these issues, all the political parties are shying away now. There was a SJB and an NPP proposed debate that was supposed to happen on the 6th of June. Where is this debate?
Well, I think it's not just the debate that's happening in media. Now, do you know, for public functions, politicians are not invited, and because some can't go and face the public, that's the reality, right?
Now, Dr. Vinaya, you mentioned some very pertinent issues that need to be, the questions need to be asked of the political parties and they need to answer. But the election campaign is now in full swing.
I don't think it's still in full swing.
Well,
the politicians, it's warming up. It's still warming up.
The politicians are out there. They are going door to door. They are campaigning. We still haven't seen the mass rallies, but most of them are out there from the various parties. But as you said, we don't seem to know what their positions are on these major issues. And isn't this a failing on the part of all these parties, that we are now only about less than 5 months away from the deadline for the election? October is the 10th month. We are now in the 6th month, so just 4 months away from the election, and we don't know, the public doesn't know the answers to the policy questions, the important ones that you just spoke of.
So that's our role. I think that's where professionals, the civil society, all should now start questioning and holding them accountable to propose solutions. I think that's the only way forward.
So, Sankita, you spoke about bringing back the money that was stolen. Why isn't concrete measures being taken in this regard? Because that was one of the calls made by those who were engaged in the Aragalaya as well, but nothing has been done thus far. Why is that?
The simple answer is, for asset recovery to take place, you need initiative from within the executive arm of government. Because law enforcement needs to function, there has to be diplomatic relations for law enforcement of other countries to be able to act. For that to happen, you need political will. So if, as the people are saying, the corrupt are within government, then you will obviously not see any kind of movement. So what we are seeing is the proposed passage of a law on proceeds of crime, which, for which there is a framework out there already on the Ministry of Justice website. It's good, it still needs to improve, but we are very unlikely to see movement with things as they are right now.
So there's no point in asking the rogues to catch the rogues and return the money that they stole.
And also I think say like the IMF, I think they are also being little relaxed, I think. Isn't it? I mean, actually, we were expecting the IMF to be very strict, and now we have seen that they are not...
twist the arm of the government.
Actually, Sankita, if I may ask you...
No, not twist arms, just to their own governance indicators, even without being fulfilled by the government, they are going ahead.
But Sankita, it's not just about overseas money being sent overseas. What about money which may still be in Sri Lanka, which politicians may have invested, whether it's in penthouses in Colombo or estates or other property?
Absolutely. So, by current law and by the proposed law, that is also entirely possible, but it still comes down, Yuresh, to the question of political will, or at best, but also if you think about the arms of government that need to function, it would be the CID, the police, the CIABOC that need to function, whether they have the relevant skill set, whether they have the will, independence, the financing. These are all issues that are in question. Historically, we have seen prosecutions being foiled due to sheer ineptitude, and also due to more, subversive reasons. For example, we've seen CIABOC withdraw cases due to the lack of evidence, purportedly due to the lack of evidence, multiple high-profile cases crashing, purportedly due to a lack of evidence, when a prosecutor anywhere across the world will not take a matter to court unless they have a reasonable belief that they can secure a win through the prosecution. So they've wasted money, they have wasted prosecutors' time, courts' time, basically public goods on a farcical prosecution, or that's one option, or it was a prosecution that was proceeding that was then subverted in some way.
No, but,
so
but
this is why we're
in
not seeing it.
2015, there seemed to be that the government had a will, because they appointed the Presidential Commission of Inquiry to investigate and inquire into serious acts of fraud, corruption and abuse of power, state resources and privileges in which
They created
Lassell
the
was,
FCID, they gave the FCID training from Scotland Yard and the
happened.
Absolutely.
Nothing
So let
happened.
me give you the state of
2nd
play.
of January, they handed over the final report. Lassell was removed, right, Lassell?
Yeah, you're removed.
Removed from the post for criticizing the Prime Minister.
So let me give
Not
you the state
really
of play.
criticizing, because I was under pressure, I would say, to change my stance. But we never did that, because I was really thinking that it was a mandate given to the then government. And it was our duty as public officers to fulfill that. And I knew...
So then at that time, Sangeeta, there was the political will, but nothing took place.
No, actually what happened was...
we all know on the 2nd of January 2018, they handed over a report to Maithripala Sirisena
No,
as
no,
well.
like Sangeeta said, I personally feel we have enough and more capable people if you really want to do that. But unfortunately, there's no political will. This is the problem. As long as I would say these, 225 continues in the system, whatever said and done, nothing will be. I mean, it is impossible to achieve the ordinary man's dream.
Sangeeta, you were saying,
Let me-
yes.
yes.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the cases that were begun after the 2015 elections, what we do know is as at the end of 2017, 43 asset recovery, international asset recovery cases were in discussion. So, there were bilateral, trilateral, multilateral meetings happening between law enforcement officials in Sri Lanka. And I was at this conference where some of this took place, where CIABOC, the Financial Intelligence Unit, CID, FCID were present, the Attorney General, and these conversations were ongoing. But the thing about asset recovery is that it tends to take time, and it tends to also go on longer than one electoral cycle. So when things change, it gets very difficult, and we know things changed quite early as 2018 with the constitutional coup. The political kind of balance went askew. So I'm not saying one party is better than the other necessarily. The state of things right now says that clearly enough. But in terms of prosecutions and carrying that through to their conclusion locally and internationally, that seems to be what has happened. So what we're told is that even the capable officials who were trained have been put to traffic positions, procurement positions, and are not being used to their optimal.
Sakila, you spoke about state capture earlier as well. And when you look at, not just during the Yahapalna administration, but even before that, and in the time after that, you mentioned the sheer volume of cases where it seems almost that law enforcement, the AG's department, the courts are just being used as tools of politicians as per whims and fancies, wasting the taxpayers' money, the court's time, the time of those officers as well. When you think of state capture in a Sri Lankan context, the phrase state capture only really enters the NGO lexicon fairly recently, maybe the last decade or so. But when you look at Sri Lanka's progression, is it fair to say that the state was captured a long time ago?
I think that's clear, because the problem we have had over time is the politicization of the public sector, the public service sector. And there itself, I think we see the signs of state capture, where policies, just let's think about what's in common parlance, right? The fact that jobs are given to cronies of politicians prior to election, just as a favor. This is the quid pro quo that takes place before election. So absolute, public resources being abused for personal gain.
And technically against the law, right?
Absolutely.
Section 70 of the Bribery Act.
Against the law. So if you think about even the even if you think about how, again in public perception, if you have a conversation with someone about something political, people will say, oh, you'll get white band, or you might be tapped, right? So in the common psyche, at any point of time. That is a risk I'm sure you go through, not even a risk, but a conversation you have to answer. Anytime you appear on one of these shows and speak, I'm sure you get asked this question, all of us do. So then, in the collective psyche, we have accepted that the entire state military or intelligence infrastructure can be abused for the benefit of a few. So state capture is not new. It's something that we have collectively, I think, come to accept, but accept that it exists, but not necessarily like.
So, Dr. Jahan, so a question from one of our viewers. For how long do these politicians think they can postpone elections without infuriating the public and triggering another uprising?
I don't think elections can be postponed, and my belief is that they will not be postponed, because the people, actually the general public won't stand for it. People want elections, and the government will be facing, they will have to face down another people's protest movement, and I don't think that, I hope that the government leaders don't want to leave that as their heritage.
Dr. Jahan, overnight after Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed as the president of the country 2 years ago, he just made sure that he cleaned the golf face within a matter of 24 hours. You think people would go for another uprising?
I think this time they would, because there are two political parties, mass-based political parties, the SJB and the JVP, NPP, which quite legitimately feel that they could be the next government. And if there is an effort to thwart that through some constitutional jugglery, I think they would also support a people's movement.
Who's popular right now, Dr. Jahan, in your opinion, in the mindset of the public? Political party?
I think people are looking for a change. They want an alternative to what exists, because
no, you're right, people want a change, but my question was, who do they have in mind, in your opinion? You talk to a lot of people, you go and attend a lot of meetings. I'm sure you have somewhat of an idea.
No, that is difficult to say, because of course the public opinion polls have been saying for a long time that the JVP was ahead. Now they are saying that SJB has caught up, but always it is the case that the ruling party is in third place. When I speak to people, I hear a lot of people saying that they are supporting the JVP, but I also hear people saying that.
So, Dr. Chan, in your opinion, do you think should it be a protest vote, or should it be a vote where people are quite informed of the decision that they would take this time around at the polling booth?
No, it won't be a protest vote. It will be a vote for change. They will vote quite deliberately for a government, I think, that would meet their interests.
So let's go back in history. Just let's not look very far. Let's take a look at the last 9 years, Dr. Jahan. 2015, people wanted a change. They promoted good governance, and they appointed Maithripala Sirisena as the head of state at that time, and Ranil Wickremesinghe as the prime minister. 2019, after the Easter Sunday bomb attacks and so on and so forth, people went ahead. They wanted change then, and the Vietmaga movement was very popular at that time. They were able to bring in Gotabaya Rajapaksa as the president of the country. 2024, here we are talking about another presidential election, and you are here seated on this very show, that as you have done in the past also, and saying people want change. What is this change, Dr. Jahan, that you're talking about? We've seen these changes, haven't we? 2015 we saw that change, 2019 we saw that change, 2020, what is the change that you're talking about?
Well, I think, see, at the moment, it's in a way like India. See, what happened in India, there was this belief that India was doing very well, booming and becoming a major power in the world. But the benefits of that boom were not getting to the 80% of the people. So I think that's why the anticipated victory that Prime Minister Modi thought he would get didn't manifest itself. In fact, I think he saw the signs coming because he started becoming very nationalist and very Hindu nationalist in his campaign and anti-Muslim to generate the vote. And even then, he has fallen very much short of what he anticipated. I think a similar thing is there in Sri Lanka also. There is a sense that, oh, we have stabilized, we have now are doing quite well. But
Dr.
for
Pereira, in Sri
80%
Lanka
of the
too-
people, it's not true.
Dr. Pereira, do you feel that in Sri Lanka too, at the moment, that as far as your analysis as the National Peace Council goes, do you feel that there is, in the run-up to the election, that there is again drumming up of certain ultra-nationalists, that the dog whistling and the drums have started again, that ultra-nationalists are being put into the limelight, that religious tensions are being stirred up, that ethnic tensions are being stirred up? Do you get a sense that that's happening? Does your analysis or does your monitoring work show that that is happening again?
That, I mean, it has happened that there are clashes at the local level, and now there is the formation of a new coalition which brings together some of those people who have in the past stood for nationalism, ultra-nationalism. They have come together. But
when you look at the actions of the state itself, in the recent events in the north and east, where the women who were commemorating the dead were being arrested, certain other things as well. When you look at it, do you see an emerging pattern, not just of the forces that you mentioned that have sort of come together in one movement, but also among, in the state itself, amongst those who are currently in power and the various engines of the state? Do you see that being brought to the bubbling up again?
no, actually, I see that that actually the situation is better than it was in the past. In the past, too, there were worse things happening in terms of the repression in the of say Tamil commemoration of the end of the war. It was even worse than it is now. Actually, it is bad. The incidents we experienced this time were bad, but it was rather limited. And I think, well, one problem is this, that our state and our security forces are, I mean, they see everything in terms of some threat to national security emerging from the ethnic minorities. That is something that needs to change. But on the positive side, what I see at this time is that the three main political candidates for the presidency, the aspiring candidates, the president, Sajith Premadasa and Anura Kumar Dissanayaka, they have actually they have not used nationalism in the recent, at least Anura Kumar in the recent past. They are not using
The president made some comments fairly recently regarding the positions of religions as per the constitution. Do you feel that that was dog whistling?
I mean, he may be trying to sort of generate support for himself, but his track record has not been of using nationalism, and Sajith Premadasa also has not been using it, and Anura Kumar at this time is not using
the
it.
thing is that the reality is no person rules alone. I mean, even in the case of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he wasn't ruling alone. There were plenty of people around him. You mentioned forces that are gathering. No one rules alone. So when you look at the people that are gathering around these candidates, do you feel that your analysis is maybe a little skewed?
No, I don't, because I also think that people in this country have also learned, no? The economic collapse took place under the most nationalist government, which pledged to, develop the country and protect the race. But they didn't, and people know that now. So they know that nationalism is being used for electoral reasons.
So, Lasil, the question is, we're talking about a change. We saw the manner in which your party and even you as an individual supported the candidature of Mahesh Senanayake at the November 19th presidential election in 2000, November 16th presidential elections in 2019. And he was not even able to gain or poll 50,000 preferential votes at that time. And if you look at it now, there is news saying that he has joined the Samik Jana Balabegya on the 17th of May 2024. What sort of change are we looking at? What are the people looking for?
Actually, people, of course, understand.
We always say we need change, we say about the Aragale, but what is the change we are looking at?
Yeah, people know very well the kind of change they want. Unfortunately, the leadership we depended upon ultimately have not delivered that kind of leadership for us, basically. So now even Jihan, even Vinya said, we are getting somewhat coming to sort of, we have improved or whatever. I don't agree. Even in our case, we want a system. Now, look at even other countries. Look at states in 1920s, 30s. They spoke of this, relief, recover and reform. That was during a severe economic crisis again. Look at India in 1991, right? There was also a crisis like ours and they were nearly bankrupt and they didn't want to even announce to say that they were bankrupt, right? We know what we want. We really know what we want, but we haven't got a good kind of a leader, unfortunately, so far. But whatever it is being discussed everywhere, the kind of leadership or kind of...
So you are saying the leaders that we are now talking about, Ranil Wickremesinghe, Anil Kumar Dissanayake, Sajid Premadasa,
no, they
are not leaders.
Actually, they have failed. And the country is now in this position because of them. I would not hesitate to say it point blank.
So do you mean that the people are being asked to choose among the best among the bad lot?
Unless if there is no good leader to emerge or at least come out and then give leadership, it will be this.
There is no phoenix who's going to rise from the ashes.
No, I mean, you never know. That. You never know. Even last time, actually, they never. Constitutionally, there was a hurdle. You could Rajapaksa couldn't come for the third time because 20th Amendment. 20th Amendment prohibited that, right? So likewise, there are they had problems. Unfortunately, even that elections, right? Whatever said and done, they used every single opportunity, maybe Easter Sunday, all those, and people had no choice. And it came to a situation, we wanted a change, and Mahesh couldn't get the number of votes that we expected. So these are there, but
Mahesh was not even in the picture.
No, naturally, I mean,
some votes.
Whatever said and done, our dream was to change it, right? Like
now, just let's say just put this into perspective, will you? Now you wanted a candidate to come to the forefront. That was Mahesh Senanayake. When you saw the news on the 17th of May 2024 that Mahesh Senanayake has joined Sajid Premadasa, the SJB, what was going in your mind?
Whatever it is, I can't speak of,
Was that the right choice at that time in 2019?
Yeah, for us, he was the right choice at that moment.
So, Dr. Vinya, we're talking about teams. I asked this question from you before as well. Now, let's take a look at the NPP closely because, as Dr. Jehan said, they are somewhat leading in some of the opinion polls. But let's look at the team that is surrounding the NPP at the moment. We have Anil Kumar Dissanayake, we have Vijay Herat, we have Bimal Ratnayake, we have Suyin Handuneti, we have Dr. Nalini Jaitis, we have Lal Kanta, we have Harini Amar Surya. We have 7 people. To run a government, 7 people enough?
I think we are talking about the presidential election. What follows is, I'm sure whoever gets elected will dissolve the parliament and will go for a
So
parliamentary
in a
election.
general election, so
Yeah.
a lot of people are saying that if there is a presidential election, that because the entire country is taken as an electorate, the NPP may have a chance, hypothetically. All this on the grapevine, people are talking about it, may be a rumor, we don't know until otherwise there is an election. If there is a general election, on the other hand, the SAB may score much better. Do you agree with this analogy?
Well, it all I think it's still open, but when you look at the caliber of candidates, their educational background and the way that they relate to the people and how they analyze problems and offer solutions. Now, some solutions are not still there, right? I think you have a good skill mix there. There are people who can probably articulate better, analyze problems better, and can relate to the problems on the ground than others. So I think it's interesting to see the teams that they put forward. It's
But
not
we
just
we saw that with the Vietnam also, Dr. Vinya.
I mean, it's not my field, but I would always look at when the nominations are put there. That's what we are trying to do through March 12th movement. Really look at have criteria to evaluate individual candidates in your own area. I mean, you can't look at just the leadership there. You are talking about parliamentary, it's a general election. Then you have an electorate, your district, you are looking at the candidates, and it has worked. I mean, you take 2015 election and also 2020, some of the veteran politicians have been
Dr. Vinya,
elected out.
Dr. Vinya, forget about politics. Look at what has happened to the Bar Association of the country.
I think it's not fair to generalize here. I don't know.
But,
I mean, professional associations sometimes, you have
Politics
it all
there as
depends
well.
on the leadership, and it's the responsibility of those who lead. And it's very unfortunate to see.
Dr. Jahan, can I ask you, what's the role of the minority parties this time? What role are they playing right now? And in a closely fought out election, what power do they have this time? I'm talking specifically about the Northeast political parties, the CWC and the Muslim parties.
It's very hard to say because the parties are all divided. Now, even in the north, the TNA is divided. And, the way people will vote might be different from the way the leaders, what sides they take. So
there's no clear indication, for example, how the Tamils in the northern province would vote.
it is hard to say. It is quite hard to say. But I suppose they would look at the track record. No? Again, they would look at the track record of what has happened. And if they are not satisfied with what they have got, then they will select the least bad alternate.
Dr. Pereira, do you feel that in the north and east as well, and across the rest of the country, is something that a few political analysts actually in the papers, in their writings, it's a theme that has been discussed, that this upcoming round of elections will not be about the major issues that have usually dominated the elections, like whether it's national security or rights and freedoms, etc., or anti-corruption, that this time around, and one of the reasons that the NPP is doing well in the polling at least, is that this election, even in predominantly minority areas geographically of the country, is that this election might be more about class than anything else. I mean, Dr. Vinya was talking about unemployment and poverty in the country, and about how a lot of the political leadership has not really put forward concrete plans on poverty alleviation and tackling unemployment. You referred to the Indian election. even in the Indian election, a lot of the pundits are saying that one of the reasons that the BJP lost out was unemployment in many parts of not just rural India but also urban India across multiple states, especially in the north and center. But those issues have now come to the fore. The inequality gap, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is increasing. Middle class, depending on who you ask, middle class has either been decimated or the middle class is struggling. Economists differ on their opinion on this, but there is that issue as well. And even in the minority communities in the north and east, do you see that there is an issue of class that has now arisen, and that is why, and that there is potentially even from the minority parties that votes are bleeding to the NPP?
I think when the minorities vote, what matters most to them is their security. More than economics is their security, their sense of safety. And so when they look at what the parties offer, and in the case of, I think they would view the SLPP unfavorably, the minorities would view that, because the SLPP government is the one that conducted the war and a lot of human rights violations. I think the minorities have not forgotten that. With regard to the JVP, it is true that JVP also is, for them, untested.
But when you look at the attendance at, for example, the NPP rallies that have been held in the north and east, and you look at the fact that they seem to be attracting a fair amount of minority voters as well. Do you feel that even minority communities, the working classes within those minority communities, people from the voter from the working class voter, is more willing to overlook past excesses on the part of JVPers and former JVPers, maybe even JVPers who are no longer around, because they feel that this is the party that is speaking on the issues that they care about?
My guess is that when the minorities vote, they look at what we were talking, the teams, and they will vote for the party or the candidate who has the most multi-ethnic team. They will feel safe with that party and that leadership.
Sankita, how important is good governance? Because this was the words that most of the civil society organizations, Dr. Jehan from the National Peace Council, Dr. Sarah from the Center for Policy Alternatives, they were championing these two words, good governance, but nothing materialized. How important is good governance for a country like Sri Lanka, at least to focus on properly now?
Let me put it like this. We're talking about the economy, we're talking about poverty, we're talking about unemployment, we're talking about elections, reconciliation. For all of this to be able to come to fruition, we need good governance. Now, I know the phrase is tainted because of the good governance government, but the concept of good governance runs across the entire gamut. So, if we look at the economic crisis that we are all in, it is very, very clear and widely acknowledged that the economic crisis was caused by a governance crisis. The economic crisis case that was determined by the Supreme Court bore that out. The fact that the IMF conducted a governance diagnostic assessment for the first time in Asia for Sri Lanka, and in it acknowledged that the corruption vulnerabilities in Sri Lanka are macro-critical, bears that out. So, good governance and governance reform, both for reform's sake and for accountability's sake, is absolutely important.
Yeah, but Sangeeta, boils down to the answer that Dr. Vinya gave before, because even the IMF, we thought the IMF is going to be tough on Sri Lanka. And most of the organizations said, look at what they're proposing, look at all these are good measures for a country like Sri Lanka. Even they're not taking what they said seriously.
It seems to be more on paper than anything else.
Yeah.
Than anything else.
So if you look at, say, Verite Research's IMF tracker, it shows how we're performing, how Sri Lanka is performing on its prior actions, its structural benchmarks, and going forward, we should be tracking the governance diagnostic assessment as well. So looking at it, it is clear that the government is on a path to tick the boxes that have been set out in the agreement, revised agreements with the IMF, but it is certainly not satisfactory. As you say, Shamir, it is not enough. It may even be considered toothless, because reform is happening on one track while ignoring things like poverty. We are broadening the tax net without imposing sanctions on the existing tax base as it is. We continue, providing exemptions to people without justifications. We are yet to see that happen. So even with the IMF, what's happening in this reform process is that the people are being left out of the bargain. It's very clear in the lawmaking process, in the policy formulation process. If you look at the domestic debt restructuring process that took place, the EPF was touched. The EPF became subject to the domestic debt restructuring process, but the people who had the most stake, the employees of Sri Lanka, were left out of the process. And in every reform process, and the IMF also should take the blame for this, the IMF is privy to legal drafts way before local civil society is, or any local stakeholders are. And if you look at the the government action plan that the IMF that the government put forth as part of its structural benchmarks, to fulfill one of its structural benchmarks, to show how they would play out or enact the commitments that were required in the governance diagnostic assessment. It talks about passing laws, it talks about doing things. Sorry, let me complete this. It talks about hiring local consultants, but a stark gap in that is that it leaves out local consultation. If you look at the Public Financial Management Bill, the Economic Transformation Bill, zero public consultation, but it's on the order paper.
Is it a fair assessment to say that even as far as the IMF is concerned, as far as the statements that the IMF is making vis-a-vis governance, and there are recommendations and benchmarks on governance, that even the IMF is just paying lip service?
That may be a fair assessment to make, because the IMF at the end of the day has government as its client, and all of the negotiations happen in back rooms, and we are not privy to what goes on, and that this is why a group of civil society organizations, including the NPC and Sarvodaya, TISL, Verite, PAFRL and CPA, actually did the governance diagnostic assessment locally, because we were not sure what was happening. We were not shown a draft was shown to government, and it was published with almost no consultation, and there is certainly no information that is being given to the IMF that is being made available to local stakeholders, and this can't continue this way. You can't have expert assistance being given to Sri Lanka when local stakeholders are kept out of the process.
Dr. Jan, we have a question from our viewers. I want to take this. I usually don't take questions, but I want to take this question because I think it's very important. Why is that the topic of terrorism and national security always pop up when elections are around the corner? A few weeks ago, 4 Sri Lankans suspected to be linked to ISIS were arrested in Ahmedabad. Can this be considered fear-mongering to sway away voters?
Well, it was done by the Indian government, and also it was done during a time of election. So it is a little unusual what happened there, and I'm glad that in Sri Lanka it has not caught fire and saying that, oh, that this means that there is some Muslim terrorism going to take place in Sri Lanka. It has not been taken up as far as I can see with the political parties, which is a good thing. It was probably used in India, and in India the government tried to use anti-Islamic phobia, unfortunately, but it didn't work terribly well there either. Yeah.
So everyone is trying, no, Dr. Jahan? I now move towards Lassell De Silva, former Direct Administration Parliament. What's the way forward?
Yeah, the way forward. Actually, like what Sankita said, this governance, diagnostic report was superb. It was fantastic. And in it, there is a recommendation that there should be, action taken to repeal Strategic Development Projects Act. Now, without repealing all those acts which had eventually paved the way, or at least taken the country to bankruptcy, they are introducing so many bills right now with all kinds of hopes in order to stabilize the economy, all that. Now, I don't think any of those steps will, take us there to see a stable country with, political stability, economic stability, social stability, all that. Now, I like to quote, in 1920s, there was severe depression in America. The president was it Humphrey? And actually it was Vincent Roosevelt who came in with a new project. And that was relief, recovery and reform. There was a problem. They had to grant relief for the people, and they did all that. And relief, recovery, then recover whatever the steps, and then do all that in order to put the country on the track. And reforms, like what even IMF has suggested, they had done on their own to reform, especially industries, all that. So that is the way to go forward. Now look at India in 1991, I was just trying to even say that just a little while ago. Basically in 1991, they also went through a similar process, bankrupt. That was, it was then Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh. They took really good, meaningful steps, and they were able to change the whole system and put the country on the right track. After 1991 only, there was huge development taking place there. Now, even in our country, all what we need, at least follow the steps taken by Roosevelt, and again, if possible, even India. India, they did the same kind of reforms like what we did in 1978. Liberalization, privatization, globalization, they call it, right? Having done all that in 1978, why did we fail? It was bad management, bad governance. Now, there was corruption. I would say not only corruption, there has been all kinds of abuse of power for a long period of time. Now, World Bank had repeatedly said we were facing a twin deficit, a budget deficit, and then foreign currency, shortage. So without reforming all those things, they were going on borrowing endlessly. Now what happened in 2003, having seen all that, they enacted a law that was Fiscal Responsibility Act, Fiscal Responsibility Act. Now, even those provisions that was enforced in the act there were not followed, not respected, didn't want to even abide by. So, having gone through a situation like that, ultimately we ended up with bankruptcy, all that. My suggestion is, right, there is enough and more lessons to learn globally. I don't think any of these people in the government, or at least those parties who are trying to sort of get power, they have any plans in order to really look at the big picture and then take necessary steps to reform the country. So all what I say, we have a set of educated youth. We have fairly a good number of people who can understand, political literacy, though they say people are not intelligent. No, they are intelligent. I really think we have a duty, if possible, to tell the people we need the change, so-called change what we have been dreaming of for a long period of time. If it is possible, I think we might be able to put the country on the track.
Thank you very much, Lasal De Silva, former Director of Administration Parliament, Attorney at Law, Sankita.
The governance reform agenda, whether we like it or not, has been set in the commitments that Sri Lanka has given to the IMF, and that is a 4.5-year program. So arguably that has been set. It may not be all encompassing, but we have a roadmap there. So what I would call on the people to do is to keep watch on that, ensure that you make every inroad possible to participate, but also I would call upon those that are in power now, those that will be elected, whoever they may be, to ensure that people are part of this process, because the more you fail to do that, the more you lose legitimacy, and we, repeat the loop. And reform and anti-corruption is slow work. It ends up being slow work. We see that, especially in Sri Lanka's context, the Right to Information Act took over 20 years to be enacted. The campaign was that long. I'm not saying that's okay, but that is the reality. So we have to acknowledge that and keep chipping away at that. But also from the parties going forward, what I would demand as the citizens is to put forward the anti-corruption agenda for when they're in power, for within. How will they deal with corruption within the parties, within government? We need to hear that. They need to establish that in order to be able to even gain a grain of trust. The second one is what we are not saying is the party's anti-corruption agenda for the country. We are yet to see that clearly because, as Nadeem alluded to, as I've talked about before, we are coming out of state capture. We have to be very clear that there's not going to be a sweeping solution, there's not going to be a massive change. We're dealing with a huge public sector of almost 2 million employees. We're dealing with a citizenry that has got used to being victimized by corruption and therefore has also learned to a large extent to use it to their benefit. We're working with the private sector that is colluding with politicians and the public service to get ahead using the very system that makes conditions completely unpredictable and untenable for their own subsistence. So given that we are talking about coming out of that, first, it's not going to be easy or quick. Second, we need to be cognizant that the change can't be expected quickly either. Like, it cannot happen and it cannot be expected to happen either. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sankita. Dr. Vinayara.
Yeah, Shamir, I would look at the team. Of course, the leader is important. We should have a leader who has a social conscience and who can really gain the trust of all people of this country, not just the numerical minority belonging to a certain ethnic group or a religious group. So I think we need a leader who can transcend divisions and unite, because that's what we need. So a person whom you can trust and a very competent and uncorrupt team. And that is where, criteria put forward by March 12th movement and, all those ideals that we like to see in the leaders who govern us are becoming very important. So this is a time where, of course, I don't think we should even discuss this question of whether we should have an election or not. I think it's a given. I think it's non-negotiable. We need to follow the constitution, and election should be held. And then the presidential election, the best candidates who can fulfill those criteria should get elected. And it's still open. I am sure, although there are candidates who have already come forward, there can be surprises as well. So, and then of course, when you are electing the parliamentary representatives, the MPs that you are going to who are going to represent you in your constituency, I think this time there has to be a significant change. Probably a generation might go out, or they have to either voluntarily retire and go out of politics, or will be, I think, forced to retire. That's my prediction, because we have 4.3 million youth. I think there's a huge youth vote in this country, and given the tremendous unemployment, unless whoever the leader who want to be the leader of this country has to come up with practical solutions. I don't think you can just come up with just promises this time, because the majority of the people are not going to buy that, particularly the young people, because I work with a lot of young people, and they are much more informed than before, and they are demanding accountability, and that's the culture we want to promote. So I would expect the political parties to respect that, and also admit the fact that the youth in this country and everyone are demanding that from them, and that they have to deliver. So accountable political parties that are able to present practical solutions to deep problems or crises that we are having now, and I think they should then be given the chance to rule this country.
Dr. Vinya, one final question, because I asked a question from Dr. Jehan as well. I thought I'll close this session today by posing a question. You said something very interesting. You said we have to appoint people who are not corrupt and who have an unblemished character in terms of their service to the public. Isn't there anyone right now? Because a few people have announced their candidacy for the presidential election. Out of that lot, can you pick one with
no, I would go for the candidate who, as Sankita said, who would voluntarily declare their assets. That is my criteria. I don't think you can look at the track record. If they voluntarily declare their assets, I think that is the candidate I will consider. There may be other criteria, but when it comes to corruption, that will be my criteria to judge. Publicly, yeah.
Good. Not just submit the declaration
to the yes,
and
to the elections commission.
Put it online.
We mustn't forget the all four candidates in the parliamentary presidential election that happened did not make their asset declarations publicly available.
Wow. Dr. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Jehan Pereira, Executive Director of the National Peace Council, Lasil De Silva, former Director of Administration Parliament, Attorney at Law Sankita Gunratna, Head of Governance and Anti-Corruption at Verity Research, Dr. Vinya Ratna, President of the Sarvodaya Movement. Thank you very much, gentlemen and the lady, for joining us this evening on the show despite your demanding schedule. Thank you very much, Nirosha Thambi, Consultant Director at Newsfirst. Thank you very much, Nadeem, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. Political possibilities are ample. You have to choose wisely whether it's an election or a referendum. Choose wisely and act when required. I'll leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. Integrity, transparency and the fight against corruption have to be part of the culture. They have to be taught as fundamental values. Take care and good night.